Did you know that you have between 16,000 and 64,000 thoughts a day? What if the biggest thing holding your marriage back isn't your spouse or your schedule, but just the way you think? Today I'm talking to Ted Lowe, author of Us in Mind, How Changing Your Thoughts Can Change Your Marriage. And in it, he introduces 5 intentional thoughts that can transform the way you see and love each other. We'll unpack those together, what they look like in real life and why they're so hard to live out, and the small mindset shifts that can create a big ripple effect in your marriage. It turns out marriage research and neuroscience illuminate what scripture has been saying all along, and I think you'll find yourself saying more than once, "That's me." Well, Ted Lowe, thank you so much for joining us today on the One Shape Marriage podcast. We're super excited to have you.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Now, Ted, I have to say I absolutely love your book, and I know it's an impactful book because my mom texted me the other day, and she said, "Hey, I read Ted's book, and I love it." And so I know that it's a really impactful book and one that has a lot of great stuff in the marriage space.
Oh, that's cool to hear. Thank you.
So when I was reading through your book, I noticed there was this idea of 5 intentional thoughts. And today I think it would be great to just run through some of the different thoughts in your book. But if you don't mind, could you give us a quick overview of kind of who you are and what you do, a little bit about your background?
Yeah, absolutely. So Nancy, my wife, and I have been married for 30 years. We have 4 kids ranging in ages from 15 to 25. I've been speaking and writing on marriage since about year 6 into our marriage. So it's been going on for a while. For whatever reason, I feel like marriage is the thing that God has for me to do, at least right now. And so until He tells me different, we're just gonna keep charging ahead.
Yeah.
But it's been a fun ride.
No, I love that. Yeah, 6 years into marriage and then jumping straight into ministry is the way to do it.
Yeah, because we knew so much. I didn't want people to have to wait to hear what I had to say. So that was sarcasm, of course.
Yeah. No, it's fun because I get to MC our retreats from time to time, and it's always fun. I get up on stage to, welcome everyone to the weekend, and people always have that like nervous pause because they're like, "Is this the guy that's speaking?" And so it's always fun to share. No, I'm actually not the marriage expert in the room today, but I love your book, like I said. And one of the things that kind of stuck out to me is this idea of changing your thought pattern and changing your mind and the impact that can have on your marriage. There's so many different marriage books that talk about like, hey, do this one thing and you can be a better spouse. Hey, here's how you can love better. Here's how you can have better intimacy or whatever it may be. But this idea of changing your thoughts is kind of a unique perspective. What was the inspiration or thinking behind the book when you first wrote it?
Yeah, I did a deep dive on the research of couples that were doing great, that had the highest level of marital satisfaction. So much of the marriage research is based around couples that are struggling, and it's so important, and I've learned so much. We'll continue to learn from that. But I wanted to know, like, what are couples doing that are crushing it? What are they doing? And what we had done so long in marriage research is we had taken what the couples that were doing and struggling, and we'd go, don't do that. Do the opposite. And so one of the biggest thing they found that couples that were struggling was that they didn't understand each other. So everybody's assumption was, oh, so the ones that are happy really have these amazing communication skills, and they really know how to talk things through. And it turns out that while that was logical, it wasn't correct. The only common denominator with couples who were crushing it were couples who, turns out they just think in a way that unhappy couples don't. Their brains are geared in a way, and this neuroscience shows this, marriage research shows this, that they think in a way that helps them act in a way that draws their spouse to them instead of pushing them away. And it was really fascinating to the point where I was like, oh, I feel like I've got to write a book. And let me just tell you, friend, I didn't want to write another book at all. I don't know what people, for me at least, this is number 4, and it was so hard. No, see, I can't even count. It's number 3. Yeah. And I was like, what am I doing? But I felt like I don't think couples know this, and if they do, I really think it would matter. And I thought, can we help couples not just run on autopilot? Because I don't know about you, but no one ever told me I shouldn't believe everything I thought. that I shouldn't trust every thought. And we have between 16,000 and 64,000 thoughts a day. Scripture is really clear. You be transformed by the renewing of your mind, and so take every thought captive. And so it started this thing. I thought, what if instead of letting our brains run on autopilot, what if we got intentional and we started to help couples to think in a way that helps them act in a way that draws their spouse to them?
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And you think about this idea of communication being important, but communication is downstream of the mindset and the thoughts that you have. And so if you can get to that point of really guarding your thoughts and keeping every thought captive, like you mentioned, I
Yeah.
could totally see how that not only plays into communication, but plays into every aspect of your marriage.
Yeah, absolutely. Because what it hit me one day, I thought, I've been trying to help couples all these years with their actions and their attitudes, which I'll continue to do that. I think that's important. But I thought, before those actions and their attitudes are some thoughts that lead to them. Because your thoughts aren't your actions or your attitudes, but they lead to both. So I thought, what would happen if we backed up a little bit? And would that change if I change my mindset? Would I act differently? Would I have a different attitude? So that's what it was. That's what it was birthed out of. And Scripture is really clear. The thing I love about working with married couples and getting to do what I get to do is how the marriage research and now the neuroscience completely aligns and illuminates what Scripture has been telling us all along. There's zero conflict, zero conflict. So God's way, long before we knew anything about neuroscience or there was such a thing as marriage research, was pointing us in the right direction all along. And that is one of the keys that keeps me going. I'm going, wow, God, you're so obvious with how you want us to love each other.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned this idea of intentional thoughts that you can kind of put into your brain to transform everything in your marriage. And in your book, you mentioned 5 of those. The first one that you mentioned is this idea of remembering who you are. Could you
Right.
share a little bit about what you mean by that?
Yeah, absolutely. This was the chapter that I cut and pasted like 3 times because I get pretty vulnerable about what has been a lifelong struggle with how I think about myself and the things that I say. In fact, it can be so negative. I call it Fred in my head. And so our big joke, Nancy will say, "How you doing?" And I'll go, "Well, Fred's being really mean today." And so I started processing this, and there's an exercise that's been around for 30 plus years that has tremendous success, but nobody knows about. And I took that and blended it with Scripture to help get Fred out of your head because we forget who we are. And we start hearing those things in our head like, "You're so stupid. You're never going to figure this out. I can't believe you just did that. I can't believe you just said that." You think, would my Abba Father ever say those things to me? No, he wouldn't. He might convict me, but he doesn't condemn me. And so there's this grid that I give in the book that helps couples, and individuals to really process what they're thinking about themselves, because how you think about yourself greatly impacts how your spouse experiences you. I mean, you're driving home and Fred says, driving home from work, and Fred says, "Hey, I could tell that people in that meeting, they were not liking what you're bringing to the table. And I heard there's job openings, and you know what I think? I think it's going to be you." Now think about all that swirling in your head. You walk in the house and your spouse says, "Hey, how you doing?" Are you going to be able to connecting? Are you going to focus on them? Are you going to focus on their day? Are you going to be sitting having conversations with Fred instead of your spouse? And so when we start getting settled and remember who we are and whose we are, it changes everything. Because then we don't expect our spouse to tell us we're okay.
Yeah.
Like God will use them to tell us okay, but when we lean in them to God-sized levels, that's really dangerous place. And it's too much pressure to put on a spouse. So when we remember who we are, it's just massive.
Yeah, I think when we're not rooted in our identity, it is so easy to make your spouse try to carry a weight that they were never meant to carry.
That's
And
good.
that is just a burden that they're not meant to bear. And so
Right.
when you have
Mm.
that confidence in who you are and you're rooted in Christ, then it gives you so much more ability to then show up in those places and not put that pressure on your spouse. But then the other thing that I think is so true is, identity, it kind of leaks. Like it seeps into everything that you do.
Good.
And so when you're
Mm,
doubting yourself and you have that lack of confidence or what am I rooted in, that shows up in your marriage, it shows up in your family, it shows up in work. And so it really is
so
so
true.
important to lean into that. But
Mm.
you mentioned Fred, and I'm kind of curious, like the idea of giving this inner voice in your head a name. Could you talk about Fred a little bit?
Oh my gosh, we have had so much fun with this. And what it does, it separates these thoughts from coming from you, and more importantly, it separates them from coming from God. So you put this out, you put it out here, and people said to me, "Is Fred the devil?" And I'm like, "He's at least a highly compensated employee." So I'm just going to leave it at that. And there's something, I'm a big believer in humor. There's something about making that more fun and putting that outside of you. I have people that text me all the time about, Fred in their head. And this is what my Fred said. I got a text the other day, and the guy sent me a screenshot. And his wife was asking him for some receipts. And she says, and he was like, "I'm so sorry, I'm blah, blah, blah," and apologizes. And she says, "No Fred in your head, just look for the receipts." And so that has been so sticky for people. And I get people to name their own. They don't have to name theirs Fred. In fact, I've had a couple of Freds that were pretty insulted. But I have people to name them so it can separate them. And it gives you a healthy sense of separation from those thoughts instead of them feeling like this is you talking to you or, again, God talking to you.
So it sounds like Fred is kind of like a label to that inner voice that's going on in your head. And you might think that that inner voice is just an extension of who you are, or like, this is how I
Right.
truly am, or this is God speaking to me. But you're saying
Totally.
Fred is a way of separating those things and saying, like, hey, actually, Fred is just your reaction in the moment to what you're processing in real time. And it's not necessarily you, it's not necessarily God. It's just like this inner voice that's happening separate from all of those things.
Absolutely. Could not have said it better. In fact, you actually said it better. So there you go. That's good. You're exactly right. It separates him from us and our identity, and it's one of the most powerful things that I've ever done in my entire life. Because Scripture is very clear. The Spirit I gave you does not make you slaves again, so that you live in fear. The Spirit I gave you was adoption through Christ Jesus, and by Him you can cry, "Abba, Father." And so it's like you used to be a slave. He's talking about the slaves of the law and this slave to, I got to get everything right. If I don't do this right and if I do this wrong, he said, "You're not a slave anymore. You're mine." And so how radical this was to this audience to hear this, who had been walking this tightrope with God, that just said, "No, no, no. It's Abba, Father. It's the one you worship. It's the Father. He's as impressive and as mighty and as all-striking as he's ever been, but he's also this dad that will hold you." And that's a lot to wrap your head around, but boy, when we do, it changes changes us and changes our marriage.
Yeah. Now, you talked about this idea of things that change your marriage. One of your intentional thoughts you mentioned in the book is see the best in your spouse. And I think that's one of those that sounds great and you want to put it on like a poster or something, like, I will see the best in my spouse.
Right, with a
But
cat. Yeah.
yeah, and then in
Yep.
reality, it probably surfaces pretty differently than what you might expect. But talk about seeing the best.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the best pieces of research that I found that was probably one of the biggest drivers to want to write the book is they they found that the couples who ranked themselves higher uh, in their marriage satisfaction, they gave them this, basically a spousal report card, and says rank your spouse on categories like compassion and generosity and kindness. And the common denominator of all these couples were the couples that ranked their spouse higher in every category than their spouse had ranked themselves. So if I rank Nancy a 7 in generosity or 8 in generosity and she ranks herself a 6, that's a sign of a healthy marriage. And so it's basically, a great marriage is made up of two people, and sometimes one person that can start this that says, "I just wish you could see you like I see you." And I talked about this at a date night, and this lady comes up, and she said, "I've been married 60 years, and the way my husband says it is, I wish you could see you through my eyes." And so it's this seeing the best. I'm going to give you what one researcher calls the most generous explanation for your behavior, and I'm going to believe it. And so you go, whoa, it feels like rose-colored glasses. It feels like a poster, like you were talking about earlier. But when you go to Philippians 4:8, I encourage couples to do this all the time. Philippians 4:8 gives us a filter for thinking that's very, very clear. And it starts with what is true. So if anybody is, God forbid, being physically or emotionally abused, here's what's true about that. That's not okay. That's got to stop. And that could be, in some situations, a deal killer, right? If that's true. But usually we don't live in that kind of extreme. And what's also true is there's some really great things about your spouse. And then it says whatever's noble. And you start running your head through, what's noble about my spouse? You know, one of the toughest seasons of our marriage is when we had moved from California back here to Atlanta, and I was not adjusting well. And Nancy was adjusting beautifully. And I remember having this moment where I thought, I think she tricked me into this. I think she made me think that it was my idea, and it was really her idea. And then I had this thought, and I say it was zero humor, and I hate even saying it out loud, but I thought, I think she's manipulative. And when you put that kind of badge on your person, that's very, very dangerous, because here's what was true. If I'd have stopped in that moment, went, what's true? Well, what's true is we decided together. What's also true is I'm having a hard time adjusting. She's not. Now, what's noble? Well, here's what's noble is she left her life at 23 to join my life in California when I was 25, when we got married, and drove a job 1 hour each way that she didn't love. She left her parents, she left all of her friends, and we did that for 5 years. And then we moved back here a couple of months in Atlanta, and she's manipulative. That is not true. And so Scripture is very, very clear about this. And the truth is a great protector of, it's not rose-colored glasses. But then it's just this filter, because life robs us of stopping and loving our spouse with our thoughts. What's great about them? Because a lot of times we're just in survival. Whose turn is it to pick up the kids? And we're just living like roommates. And so there's no room, and there's nothing natural in our culture that pushes for us to answer those questions. But Scripture does. And when we pause and think about it, it's so powerful. And that's why I love retreats at WindShape, right? It gives people that margin to pause and to think. What do I love about my person? And we can think better about how we love them when we're eating ice cream at WindShape. I think it's scientifically proven.
I think it might be.
Think anybody could argue with that. But I think that's one of my favorite things about WindShape. It gives people time to think in a way that I think honors God and is helpful for their marriage.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned this example of you and Nancy moving back to Atlanta from California. And you mentioned this idea of like, hey, you were getting to this place of like, you felt like she was being manipulative. And you kind of found that thought process in your head. But could you share for people that maybe don't even identify, like, hey, I'm not seeing the best? Like, what are some signs or warning flags they can look out for and say, like, hey, I need to stop what I'm doing and actually start running my thoughts through this filter?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I would say right now in your marriage, what is that point of contention? Or what's that thing about your spouse that drives you crazy? What are you thinking about them? And really sitting, not because we'll only talk about serious things with our spouse when we're in the middle of them. We'll only talk about the budget when they feel like they've done it wrong. We'll only talk about parenting when they feel like they've done it the wrong way. But when we have these neutral moments, and hopefully people are they're not triggered as they're listening to this podcast. And research shows that when you're triggered, the logical part of your brain is out to lunch. And so everything's emotional. You can hear people arguing, and they're like, there's not a lot of logic in the building at that point because they're operating out of the emotional part. But when we pull the side and we're calm and we're going, okay, this is driving me crazy that she's working so late every night. What's true about that? Let's get our heads around what's true about that. Is it really true that she doesn't want to be around the family? And it may be, but let's back up. Does she not want to be around the family because what I'm bringing to the table? Does she not? I think what it does is it just gives you some truth to deal with, and then you start going, what's noble about her going to work? What's righteous about her going to work? What's true about me? What about, what's true? What do I own 10% of this thing about them that's driving me crazy? What 10% is this is mine? It might just be my attitude towards something they're doing completely wrong,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so it really does change things when you put that filter when you're not triggered. But that's the key. You can't do it when you're not, if you're triggered, because I'll tell you exactly what's
Yeah,
true.
yeah.
You
When
know?
Fred is yapping in your ear and you're trying to
Oh,
overlook him. And the thing I love about that
absolutely.
too is, a lot of times your spouse is going through battles that you don't even understand or comprehend. Like you might be thinking like,
Right.
hey, why are they like kind of rude this evening? Like what's going on? And like you don't even know that they had a terrible morning dropping your kid off at school, and they're like
Mm,
still trying to recover from that. And so I think assuming the best and running those thoughts through that filtration process, it's kind of like, hey, actually, is there something that I'm missing here? Like
mm.
what do I need to look for to see the full picture?
So it's so good. I mean, there's a stat right now that's so sad that the average married couple speaks less than 4 minutes a day. So when you don't know things, when you don't have that context of what's going on because you haven't spent the time getting to know or having like, how was work this morning and what's you are only going to see their behavior. And when we don't see the context around the behavior, that's when it gets really hard. And that's when your person feels misunderstood. And that's when they stop opening up to you because they feel like they're feeling judged.
Yeah.
And so we've got to have this time to just talk. Again, I'm going to keep coming back to this again and again about wind shape or date nights or space. It gives us time to make sure we know what's going on with our spouse because changes our person,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And we got to keep up.
Yep.
We got to keep up.
Yeah. Now, you talk about in the book this idea of choosing empathy. And, empathy is a really tricky word because a lot of times you can think empathy means just agreeing all the time. Like, oh, yeah, I
Yeah.
agree with you. Or it's also challenging for men in particular because a lot of times empathy looks like or can feel like, hey, I'm going to try and fix like how you're feeling, or I want to try and like, hey, I see a problem. I'm going to try and save the day and go into like hero mode. Talk about empathy and how that plays out in marriage.
Oh, this one was the most convicting of the whole book, friend, for sure. Like, I've been writing about marriage and podcasting and all the different thing about marriage for 20 plus years. And as I'm studying couples that were really happy, this word empathy kept coming up over and over. And I'm embarrassed to tell you, I was like, what does that mean? What does that word even mean? I mean, it was that far. And so John Gottman defines it as our capacity to identify and share in our spouse's emotions. And because I think the word empathy, when I heard that, it feels a little squishy to me. Like it's something your grandma's really good. Oh, my grandma's so empathetic.
Yeah.
And it turns out it's super glue for our marriage. And so when I started to go, wow, I have empathetic thoughts toward my wife, like I hurt for her when she's hurting, my actions are anything but. I want to fix it. I remember her saying something to me about a coworker early on in her marriage. She came home and she was struggling with a coworker, and I say, hey, I feel like we've talked about this before, which you can see where this was
Always a
headed.
good starting point for any conversation.
Oh my gosh! I mean, I teach out of my failures, and I've got such a catalog of them. But I said, I feel like we've talked about this before, and I know you don't like confrontation, but I think if you'd have a hard conversation with this woman, it could change the whole thing, and just 15 minutes tops could change every minute that you have at work.
Uh-huh.
And my wife of about 2 years at that time looks at me and goes, blah, 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 blah. And I went, did you just blah, blah, blah me? And then all our fights would be like this. She would share something bothering her. I would fix it, always had an answer. And then finally she said, I don't want you to fix this. I want you to feel this. And turns out research backs this up. And the analogy the researcher gives is when someone's standing in an emotional puddle, what we can tend to do, men and women, but we're really good at this, is we try to pull our wives out with logic. Because when someone's emotional, they're not talking logically a lot of times. And so we think, oh, if you had a different lens, and our heart is we want to help, but that's not what they're wanting. They want you to step in the puddle, which I'll be honest with you, why 4 wet feet's the answer to 2 wet feet makes no sense to me. But I'm telling you, just these two words have changed our marriage. Is just that's understandable. Oh, today was so frustrating. That's understandable. I have two teenage daughters, and I probably say that 5 times a day. And a lot of it is completely not understandable. I don't understand a word that's coming out of your mouth. But at the same time, it's those moments where you go, because I think for us, we think if we agree with an emotion, or we think if we validate emotion that we're co-signing it.
Yeah.
You're really, really mad at me. And we think if we acknowledge that they're mad about something that we've done, that we think we're co-signing that it's okay, you're mad at me. But we say in that moment, I could tell you're really frustrated that I'm late. They know that you know the topic, and they know that you know the emotion. And research shows that cools the brain. It calms the brain. People escalate fights because they want to be heard. I'm going to get louder. I'm going to bow up. I'm going to say it nastier because I need to know that you know what I'm going through. And so what empathy does, it just cuts it off at the pass. It makes them not have to go through that process of making sure you hear them to go, and I know, from a heart of a fixer, we want to fix, right? But sometimes we want to fix their emotions because we don't like them.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're inconvenient or tired, right?
Yeah. You mentioned this idea of agreeableness versus empathy. Could you kind of define those two things and like how they are different? Because when you think of empathy, it's easy to think through like, okay, yeah, if I just validate all these emotions, it means I'm saying like, yeah, you're right, And that is a very different thing than saying, yes, I understand. And so
Right.
could you kind of play those out for us?
Yeah, exactly. So let's think of an example. Let's say my wife is very timely. Like she, being on time is being 10 minutes early. And for me, if I get there, the same day, we're good. We're good. And that's not true for her. And it would frustrate me so much that she says that we're leaving at 4, and what she really means is we're leaving at 3:10. And I would be like, why don't you just say 3:10?
Yeah.
Or she'll talk about what time we want to leave. And I go, let's just cut to the chase. You tell me, I'll show up.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I honestly don't agree that we need to leave as early as we do. I don't agree with that. It doesn't make sense to me. I have to put the toaster away every single day because she doesn't want it on the kitchen counter. I will not understand that until Jesus takes me home. I don't agree with it. I don't like it. My 4-year-old looked at her one time and went, Mommy, if you would just leave it up there, Dad wouldn't have to take it up and down. And I looked at her and went, she's 4.
She gets it.
She gets it. So I don't agree with that. But that's one of those things you go, is this a hill I want to die on? No. Can I leave a few minutes earlier? I mean, we let things that don't matter to our marriage. Let it go. All these other places we'd have grace with, we want to give our spouses grace. But, a bigger ticket item would be, I want to move and you don't want to move. Right? We had a couple that went through that.
Yeah.
You want to move and I don't want to move. You want to spend more money on this house than I do. Empathy starts with understanding why they want to move. Well, understand that you want to move because you want the kids to be at a better school. Yeah. You want to move because you feel like it'll function better for our family and we'll be closer to grandma and grandpa, right? You want to move because you're kind of tired of this place and you think we need a fresh start. So, because what we can do is we can skip right to the money and go, we can't afford this.
Yeah.
And what we'll also do is we will give them labels. You are never happy. You are never satisfied. I'm never going to be able to provide. And then you start attacking the character and not the action. Empathy backs up and lets them know that you know. And a lot of times when they know that you know and you make a different decision or you decide in a different direction, that's different. Is this making sense?
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think the thing that was really helpful in those examples is the idea of, you're kind of putting a vocabulary behind empathy. And like, what does empathy actually sound like? It's, I understand, like, I hear you. And walking through like, hey, actually, I see all of the things that led you to that point. Not just, no, you're wrong. But instead saying like, hey, actually, like, I'm there with you. Like, I get it. And so I think that's helpful to have those words in your mind to help get to that point when you're communicating.
Yeah. I mean, I give people 3 quick steps. I say, I see you. A lot of times we just got to put our phones down and listen.
Yeah.
And then you mimic, you don't mock, you mimic the look on their face. I see you. Eye contact creates empathy in your brain for them. So if you're searching for empathy, the way you get it is you look at them. Because, I remember one time I was frustrated, I was monologuing to the kitchen counter, and I felt, whether it was God or Fred, I don't know, but it was helpful. It was, hey, big boy, if you're going to say those things, you look at her sweet face and say it.
Yeah.
Right? And so there's something, and you look at her face and go, wait, let me look at you. I see you. The other is I get you. That's when you let them know the topic and the emotion. I can tell you're frustrated with the kids. I can tell you're so excited about football season starting, because empathy is not just about the tough stuff. It's about the fun stuff. One study shows that how we celebrate with each other is more predictive of a strong relationship than how we fight. So when your spouse smiles, do you rejoice with that? Do you get excited with them, or do you roll your eyes? I can't believe you like this.
Yeah.
Instead of you're adorable. You're like a little kid. Look at you go. And so it's smiling and rejoicing with them, but it's also saying, I can tell you're very excited about this. I can tell you're very sad about the loss of your mom. And you obviously can't fix things like that, but you can let them know that you see when they're in pain. And the 2 words I give with that is that's understandable. Again, I can tell you're still upset about the loss of your dad. Nancy lost her dad in September, and her heart is still broken. And it's like, that is so understandable. All of our hearts are still broken. Yeah. This is your dad. And then the final one is I got you. That's when you take what you see and you get about them, I got your back. So for me, the way I let her know I got you is I'll just go whatever time she wants to leave. She likes to leave for the airport 3 hours before our flight.
Same.
Do you like to leave 3 hours before the flight?
In Atlanta, you have to. So
you do. In fairness, you do. And I have learned, why not? I can go work when I'm there. I can do whatever. Yeah. But the toaster, put it up, put it down. And I got you. And sometimes when we do things that we don't agree with, it communicates great love. I just do it because I love you. Yeah. I don't have to understand.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. Now, this idea of pause. Now, when I hear pause, my mind goes to someplace, but talk about kind of what you mean with pause.
The amazing thing with this is I had a Christian neuroscientist that did the foreword and helped me with this book, and he helped some of the phrasing. And when we got to this one, we were like, we can't have multiple words here. Like, it's got to be a quick thing, because when you're triggered, for 8 seconds at least, the logical part of your brain is completely offline. And when your spouse triggers you, it's the same part of your brain that triggers if you put your hand on a hot stove. It's called the amygdala. Yeah. So you put your hand on a hot stove, you immediately move it. There's no thought. And when we get triggered by our spouse, depending on how you respond, logical part is out to lunch. So some people fight, they step toward it. Some people freeze, like, I don't know what to do. And some people flee. I'm getting out of here. And so some of the most regrettable moments of being a dad and being a husband is when I didn't pause and I said something stupid. Pausing is like regret management. Saying you're sorry is fantastic. Not needing to is better. And what pausing does is it's regret management. Where you going? You'll never regret a pause in your marriage. You'll never. Just taking a deep breath does an amazing thing for the brain. Just deep. What would happen if marriages, when people get triggered, is they take a deep breath and they go, I need a break, or I need a second. Now, when you take a break, you don't go out and sharpen it saying how mean you're going to say it. This is when I say you invite God into this. God, give me some space for grace. Give me some perspective. But it's just slow it down. Just slow. You can always go back and say something. But that unsaying things, the damage has been done, and there's redemption there. But, just to go. Because how many times we've said things, you'll say, I swear I'd never say that again. And for all the silent people, they're like, I don't say anything for like 6 weeks. We're not talking about that. You got to come back. If you close down, you got to come back. But it's just slow down.
No, I love, because you think about 6 seconds or even 6 minutes can save you like 6 hours of fighting. Like if you just take some time and just say, hey, actually, I'm going to be really intentional about the thoughts that are running through my brain and how I'm going to communicate those to my spouse. And I go back to your point about Fred and seeing the best in your spouse. When you're in the middle of like intense conflict, it's really hard to see the best in your spouse in that moment. And so giving yourself space to actually like process through those emotions and say like, hey, actually, I need to like guard what I'm actually thinking here. And I can't do it in 1.5 seconds. Like it's going to take like more than that. And so just
Yep.
pausing and giving yourself space to say, okay, let me actually think through their intentions or run through the filters that you were saying and say like, okay, how does this apply to this conversation? I think is a really powerful thing.
Yeah. And if we don't make this space to respond for the other intentional thoughts, we'll never do them. If we don't give ourselves space to see the best, to remember who we are, to choose empathy, we don't get to do that. It's the space between triggered and reaction is where relationships are built or broken. I mean, it's in those moments that's just so important. This has been one of the, just slow down, take a breath.
Yeah,
It sounds overly simple, but it is beautiful when we do it.
indeed. Yeah. Now this idea of loving first, what does that look like in marriage?
Yeah, this one was, I feel like, I'm talking to a little bit to two audiences here, but I feel like, if you are not a follower of Jesus, this is great advice anyway. Research shows that it is. If you are a follower of Jesus, it is a directive that this is how we love, is that we go ahead and everybody talks about Ephesians 5, right? And we go straight to the love and respect verse. It's so important. But if you back up to Ephesians 5:21, it says submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. Like in other words, it's a race to the back of the line. It's I'm going to go ahead and love you first. Love first is terrible at math. It's not keeping a score. We're terrible keeping scores anyway. It never wins. That's a weird game to play anyway. When we go ahead and say, I'm just going to go ahead and love you first. And where is this going to come from? As believers, it's going to come out of reverence for Christ, who had the ultimate act of submission, which was dying for us, right? And you're like, oh, if he can die for me, like that demands a response. What's my response? I'm going to submit to in a very, very small way, right? I'm going to put that toaster right on the cabinet. Compared to his submission, it's like, this is ridiculous, right? And so I'm going to go ahead and just love you first. And you think about that, pull it out of context of marriage for a little bit, and you go, the people that loved you first, that didn't kind of wait on you growing up, that thought more highly of you than they should, you're drawn to those people. We're drawn to people who love first like that. And some people go, oh, well, they take advantage, and they might. But I think the way we're wired, most people will want to reciprocate. And that's not why you do it, but it's an act of, and it reflects the love of Jesus. I mean, the purpose of marriage is to reflect the love of Jesus if you're a believer.
Yeah.
I mean, and we can make that very, very complicated. In fact, when I was doing the book, I would ask a lot of marriage gurus, a lot of people, what's the purpose of marriage? And I get really big answers. At the end of the day, it's to reflect the love of Jesus. And how do we do that? We go ahead and just love anyway with no condition.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you have any examples of a time that loving first showed up in your marriage or what that might look like? I know you mentioned like the idea of the toaster, but curious if you had anything.
Yeah. I mean, I think when I think about couples and I think about examples like this, it is a spouse coming in very irritable. And you don't want to, you never want to set up or affirm any kind of emotional views. But let's be honest, everybody at time has those moments where they're irritable and they're tired and they're frustrated and they're insecure or whatever. In those moments, you can choose, like, don't come home and take this out on me, which is fair, right?
Yeah.
And that can't be. But in those moments, you're going to go, they've had a tough day, again, see the best, and I'm just going to go ahead and love first. It's the, hey, whose turn is it to take the kids to school? I'm not going to gauge that. I can tell I'm going to take them when it's not, quote unquote, my turn.
Yeah.
It is choosing love when it's not fair. It's choosing love when it's not balanced out. It's choosing love when you think from a logical standpoint, they don't deserve it. I mean, it's just those were marriages. It gets so powerful. I am a watcher of relationships. I eavesdrop at the airport. I watch how people interact. And one of the most fascinating examples to me is on The Amazing Race. You don't watch it as much, but I remember thinking, what makes this couple do The Amazing Race well?
Yeah.
And what makes this couple do The Amazing Race horribly? And it would be people that would allow their spouse, when they're having a really tough time, to just have a rough time. I'm not going to engage it. I'm not going to talk them out of it. I'm not going to encourage them out of it. I'm just going to let them do what they're going to do. And when they calm down, I'm even going to love them. I'm not going to make them pay for that, because usually it's, and if someone's having frustrations and it's going outward until that person engages it and tells, you just need to calm down, which has never been helpful in the history of marriage. So I think it's just those times you're going, in this moment when it's unfair, in this moment when it's not my turn, in this moment, am I going to love first or am I going to wait and balance this thing out?
Yeah.
It's radical, it's unfair, and it's beautiful. It's just like if we were waiting at fairness with God, we're a little bit toast, right? But when we love his way, if we're reflecting and loving his way, and we take it out of this gauge of the world's way, it's powerful.
It makes me think to when I first got married, and my wife, we got married like shortly after college. And so we had a lot of transition between getting married, starting jobs, all of that good stuff. And she was coming home from work, and this was my first time in our entire relationship seeing what that side of her looks like, of her coming home from after a long day of 8 hours of being around people, and you might have a bad meeting or a bad conversation or something like that. Right. And I remember for me, it was difficult thinking like, okay, hey, what's wrong? You know, we went into this idea of like, okay, I need to fix it. Like something seems off. She seems tired. She seems frustrated. Let me go in and try and like fix that situation. And eventually, I think the point I got to was like, no, actually, she's just tired. She had a long day at work. And so loving first in that moment for me looked like you were saying, just giving 30 minutes of her to come home and process and transition. And then I found that after that 30-minute period, it was like, yeah, we can go back into our normal rhythms and routines, and relationship is great. But it was just like, hey, I know it's not ideal for her to be frustrated and to be tired. I can't fix that. And so loving first looks like, hey, just giving you the space to experience that.
So what if for you did that look like? Did that be like let her come in and you went in the other room? Or were you less talkative? Like what did that look like in that moment for you?
I think for me it was kind of, there's this idea of like thermostat versus thermometer, taking the temperature of the room. And, some days you come home from work and you had a great day and you want to be super talkative and everything is great. And so you want to come home and have a conversation with your spouse and tell them about all the amazing things you did. And some days you come home and it's not that way at all. And you're like, I just want to sit on the couch and watch a movie or something. Right. And so it's a little bit of what I found was just taking the temperature of the room and saying, hey, what does this actually look like? And then loving first looked like, hey, whatever that is, I'm going to respond in a way that best suits that. And so if it's conversation, let's go into conversation. If it's, hey, actually, I just need some time to sit and not talk to anyone. I had so much conversation at work. I just want to sit and veg out. And so it looks like leaning into that is kind of what I found.
Oh, it's so good. Yep. Perfect example. Like I love that. And, loving first was taking the temperature first, gauging first. Because you could take your own temperature, engage your own self first. Yeah. And if you're tired and you're irritable, you're gauging yourself, you're going, well, that's not what I need. I need you to give me 30 minutes and I need you to talk so that's so powerful when you go, who wouldn't want to walk into somebody that's taking the temperature and then adjusting to you and giving you that space? That's powerful.
And
that's a great example.
When you run through the 5 intentional thoughts too, like in that moment of like coming home from work or whatever the example may be, one of the things that was challenging for me too is the idea of like choosing empathy. And I found like in that love first example, the idea of, hey, if she comes home from work and in the first 30 minutes, I want to have a conversation and like really connect, and she's just not in that spot. One of the things I found in running through your list is, hey, empathy is actually really challenging because it makes you not just think about your spouse's emotions, but then you also have to think about your own emotions in that environment too, and
Right.
say like, hey, why do I actually feel this need to rush to connection in that first 30 minutes, you know?
Mm.
And so not only are you giving your spouse space to say like, hey, how are they thinking? How are they feeling? But it's also like empathizing within yourself and giving yourself time to process your own emotions that you might not normally do. Especially as guys, it's so quick to just be like, oh, I want to do this or I want to do that. But
Right.
I think that's one of the powerful things about empathy in that context is
Mm.
just, hey, what is my spouse feeling? But also like, why do I feel this way? You know?
That's so good. Yep. Spot on. I'm working on a book right now called Untangling Us. It's about emotions, and that deals a lot with like what is this?
Yeah.
As a guy, I don't know. Like
Yeah.
guys, we're allowed to be angry.
Yeah.
That's the emotion that guys are allowed to have, and it's got to be tempered or whatever. But you're exactly right, because we're not trained to do that. But and even that remembering who you are, that you go, hey, I need to remember I'm a child of God, and I need to be gentle on me a little bit. I need to figure out I'm worthy. I'm a king. I'm a child of the King. Like I got to be. If I'm feeling that worth, and part of that is being empathetic, and we can be empathetic with our spouse when we're empathetic with ourselves as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, for someone listening to this conversation, let's just say they forgot everything we just said, and there's one or two like key things that you really want them to walk away with this conversation with. What might those be?
I would say the feedback that I've gotten
Yeah.
from people that have been this stickiness, and I'll own this. I feel like when something you teach is sticky, it's because you worked on it long enough and you leaned into God long enough to make it so, to make things that are complicated simple. So it's those things. There's some sticky things that I really love, but I want going, ooh, I want more sticky things. I should have worked harder to be more sticky. So here's the things that I think have been the stickiest. One is the Fred in your head, like to really start considering like that, like where's that coming from? There's an exercise in the book to help you do that. It's like 4 little steps. That's powerful. But I think you could just acknowledging the Fred in your head is huge. The other one I would say is pause. Again, that's something anybody can do to go next time you're triggered, pause. And then the other thing would be empathy and just using the words that's understandable. Just watch because it's understandable to them. Like saying that's understandable because we're not them. That's what empathy is. It's putting yourself in someone else's shoes. So to them to have that thought given their life and the way they're wired, that is understandable. To stop fixing and just say, hey, I'm so frustrated. I know. If I were you, I'd feel the same way. That is understandable. You're exhausted. I remember one weekend just being absolutely wiped from speaking, and I was, it was like a Monday, and Nancy could tell something was off. I was tired, and she goes, "How you doing?" I said, "Well, to be honest, I'm exhausted, and I'm a little bit depressed," which I don't get depressed a whole lot.
Yeah.
And she goes, "After the weekend you had, that's understandable." In other words, it's okay to lay there, Ted, which I'm not good at, like not feeling like I need to be productive.
Uh-huh.
It's okay. You don't need to change anything. You don't need to do anything. It's understandable. You're not broken. You're not wrong if you just rest. And so it's those moments of giving them permission. If your spouse is struggling at work, instead of you need to go talk to the coworker, you know what? If I were you, I'd be feeling the same way. That is completely understandable. The
Yeah.
kids are driving me crazy. I know they're a lot. It's completely understandable that they're driving you crazy. And also, one of my favorite things is the positive side of empathy. When they're excited about something, don't roll your eyes, look them in the face, and smile back and say, "I love that this is making you happy.
Yeah.
I love that this is," and that's one of my favorite things because you watch, if you tell me something good that's going on in your life, I'm going to smile back and I'm going to get happy, genuinely happy with you. What happens with couples, they feel like if something that's making their spouse happy is going to make their life hard, then I better not smile and agree with it. If you say you're adorable watching football, are you co-signing on never seeing them again on a Saturday?
Yeah. Yeah.
But I do think it's a thing. Even if you have conversations about it's too much, but you start with, I love that you have something you love. You work so hard. I may not love it, but I love that you love it. So I think those are some easy things that I would just say pick one of those. And this is what I'll tell people at retreats going, I'm going to give you 5, pick one. Now, all you overachievers, you're going to try them all? Great, perfect. But just pick one and just give it a shot for a week and just watch. It's pretty awesome to watch the simple things, because the way God tells us to love each other isn't easy and it's not natural, but it is clear. It is simple. It's not easy, but it is simple.
Yeah.
And that's the thing I love. He tells us quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to become angry, pause.
Yeah.
Right. So it's just those little, rejoice with those, rejoice, cry with those who cry. Choose empathy. And so all this is based on things he's been giving us for 2,000 years. And if listeners are going, I don't know where I am with faith and this, and going, research, neuroscience completely aligns to it. Just give it a try.
Yeah. And I love that. Just pick one of the 5 and try it out for a week and just see what happens.
Yeah, give it a shot. And I think, like you go, which one resonated with you the most? Which one's like, maybe you've got a temper and it's the pause thing. Maybe you're a fixer and it's the empathy thing. Maybe it's that you're brutal on yourself and it's the Fred thing. But just, pick one.
Yeah. Well, Ted, thank you so much for joining us. Will you mind sharing with our listeners where they can find your book?
Yeah, absolutely. You can find it on Amazon. It's called Us and Mine, How Change Your Thoughts Can Change Your Marriage. You can also go to forusmarriage.com or tedlowe.com, takes you to the same place, and you can find the books there and some resources and different things.
Awesome. Well, Ted, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it.
Oh, thanks for having me. I always love partnering with WinShape. I so love what you guys are doing, and your heart for it, and your consistency, and your faith, and to just keep getting better and better and better. And it's just incredible what God is doing. And so anytime I can be a little part, I am all in.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And for those listening, thank you so much for tuning in to this week's episode of the One-Shaped Marriage Podcast. And we'll catch you right back here next week.
We hope that conversation blesses your marriage. If you're loving the One-Shaped Marriage Podcast, will you please take a moment to make sure you're subscribed? You may be a faithful listener and not realized you aren't subscribed. It really helps us out. Also, if you've enjoyed these conversations and they've impacted your marriage, please rate and review this podcast. One listener said, "Thanks so much for pouring into couples with godly wisdom and practical equipping.